What if I told you that the peace you've been desperately searching for isn't hiding in some distant future or locked away in your past, but sitting right here, right now in this very moment? Stay with me, because what happens next might completely change how you see your own restless mind. There was a young man named Ethan who lived in a quiet town somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. His life, from the outside, looked perfectly normal. He had a decent job, a small apartment, friends who cared about him. But inside his mind, there was chaos. His thoughts were like wild horses, racing endlessly between what he'd done wrong yesterday and what might go wrong tomorrow. Every mistake he'd ever made played on repeat in his head like a broken record. Every uncertain future scenario kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling, his chest tight with anxiety he couldn't name. He couldn't enjoy his morning coffee without his mind drifting to some embarrassing moment from 5 years ago. He couldn't watch a movie without worrying about next month's bills. Even sitting in silence felt like torture, because that's when the thoughts screamed the loudest. Ethan was exhausted, not from working too hard or sleeping too little, but from the constant battle raging inside his own head. One cold autumn morning, after another sleepless night, Ethan made a decision. He'd heard stories about an old man named Samuel who lived in a small cabin near the mountains, about 2 hours north of town. People called him the hermit, the wise one, the old monk, though Samuel had never claimed any of these titles. What Ethan knew was this: people who visited Samuel often came back changed, lighter somehow, like they'd set down a burden they'd been carrying for years. Desperate and out of options, Ethan packed a small bag, got in his car, and drove north. The road wound through forests of towering pines, their branches heavy with morning mist. He barely noticed the beauty around him. His mind was too busy rehearsing what he'd say, worrying if this was a waste of time, replaying every failed attempt he'd made to fix himself. When he finally arrived, he found a narrow dirt path leading up into the hills. He parked his car and began to walk. The path was steep and uneven, but Ethan pushed forward, driven by a desperation that had been building for years. After nearly an hour of climbing, he reached a clearing where a small wooden cabin stood beneath an ancient oak tree. Sitting on the porch in a simple wooden chair was Samuel. He was older than Ethan expected, maybe in his 70s, with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of a life lived fully. He wasn't meditating or chanting or doing anything mystical. He was just sitting there, watching the clouds drift by, completely at peace. Ethan approached slowly, suddenly feeling foolish. What was he doing here? What could this old man possibly tell him that he hadn't already heard? But Samuel looked up and smiled warmly, as if he'd been expecting him. "Come, sit down," Samuel said, gesturing to another chair. Ethan sat, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Sir, I don't know if you can help me, but I had to try. My mind, it never stops. I can't escape my own thoughts. Every mistake I've made haunts me. Every possible future terrifies me. I've tried everything. Therapy, meditation apps, self-help books, medications. Nothing works. I just want peace. Just one moment of peace." Samuel listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. When Ethan finished, Samuel nodded slowly, as if he understood everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. "I can help you," Samuel said quietly, "but first you need to do something for me." Ethan leaned forward eagerly. "Anything. I'll do whatever it takes." Samuel stood up and walked inside the cabin. He returned a moment later carrying a small oil lantern, the kind that looked like it belonged in another century. Inside the glass chamber, a small flame flickered gently. Samuel held it out to Ethan. "I need you to take this lantern down to the town at the base of the mountain. Then bring it back up here to me." Ethan took the lantern carefully, confused. "That's it? Just walk down and back up?" Samuel's expression remained serious. "There's one rule. The flame cannot go out. Not even for a second. If it does, you must start over from the beginning. Do you understand?" Ethan looked at the delicate flame dancing inside the glass. It seemed simple enough. "Yes, I understand." "Good," Samuel said, stepping back. "Then begin." Ethan stood, holding the lantern in both hands, and started down the path. Almost immediately, he understood this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. The mountain breeze picked up, and the flame flickered dangerously. He instinctively cupped his hand around the lantern, slowing his pace. He had to watch every step now. A sudden movement, a stumble, anything could extinguish that fragile flame. About 10 minutes into his descent, he encountered a group of hikers coming up the trail. They were laughing, talking loudly, clearly enjoying their day. "Hey man, beautiful morning, isn't it?" one of them called out. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but the lantern's flame wavered. He froze, his entire body tense, waiting for it to steady. The hikers passed by, giving him curious looks, but Ethan couldn't acknowledge them. His world had shrunk to the size of that small glass chamber and the flickering light inside it. As he continued down, his mind tried to wander. It started replaying an argument he'd had with his boss last week. But then the flame flickered, and his attention snapped back. There was no room for past arguments. Not now. A few minutes later, his thoughts drifted to his rent payment due next week. Would he have enough? But again, the flame demanded his attention as a gust of wind threatened to blow it out. There was no space for future worries either. Not while he was walking this path. The trail grew steeper, and Ethan's legs began to ache. His arms trembled slightly from holding the lantern so carefully. Small rocks rolled beneath his feet, and he had to move with deliberate slowness, testing each step before committing his weight. A deer suddenly appeared on the path ahead, beautiful and graceful. Normally, Ethan would have stopped to admire it. Maybe pulled out his phone to take a picture. But he barely glanced at it. His eyes were locked on the flame. The sun climbed higher, and the morning grew warm. Sweat began to trickle down Ethan's forehead, but he didn't wipe it away. Both hands were protecting the lantern. His mouth was dry, and his water bottle was in his backpack, but stopping to drink felt impossible. The flame came first. Everything else was secondary. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ethan reached the small town at the base of the mountain. He stood at the edge of Main Street, breathing heavily, his legs shaking from the careful descent. The flame still burned. Without hesitation, he turned around and began the journey back up. The climb was brutal. Every step was an effort. His thighs burned. His breath came in short gasps, but his focus never wavered. When his mind tried to complain about the pain, the flame flickered, and he pushed the thought away. When he started to wonder how much farther he had to go, the flame demanded his attention back to the present step, this breath, this moment. The afternoon sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Birds sang their evening songs in the trees. The forest around him was alive with beauty and sound, but Ethan saw none of it, heard none of it. His entire universe had collapsed into that single point of light in his hands. His body screamed for rest, but he kept climbing, one step, then another. Watch the flame, breathe. Another step. Watch the flame. Nothing else existed. Nothing else mattered. When he finally stumbled into the clearing where Samuel's cabin stood, the old man was exactly where Ethan had left him, sitting peacefully on the porch. Ethan's legs nearly gave out as he approached. His hands were shaking. His clothes were soaked with sweat. But the flame, that precious flame, still burned bright inside the lantern. "I did it," Ethan gasped, carefully handing the lantern back to Samuel. "I brought it back." The flame never went out. Samuel took the lantern and set it down gently. "Well done," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Now tell me, what did you see on your journey?" Ethan thought for a moment, confused by the question. "See, I didn't really see anything. I was too focused on the flame." Samuel nodded. "Did you notice the beautiful sunrise this morning? Or the deer on the path? Did you hear the hikers laughing?" Did you see the sunset beginning as you climbed back up? Ethan shook his head slowly. No, I was watching the flame. I couldn't let it go out. And during this journey, Samuel continued, his voice gentle but purposeful, did you think about your past mistakes? Did those memories that usually haunt you come flooding back? Ethan's eyes widened as realization began to dawn. No, they didn't. I was so focused on protecting the flame that I didn't have room for those thoughts. Samuel leaned forward slightly. And what about your future? All those worries about tomorrow, about next week, about what might go wrong. Did those anxieties grip you while you were walking? Ethan felt something shift inside his chest, like a door opening. No, he whispered. There was no space for any of that. The only thing that mattered was keeping that flame alive, being present with each step, each moment. Samuel smiled, a deep knowing smile. And tell me, Ethan, during those hours when your entire attention was focused on protecting that flame, were you at peace? The question hung in the air like the last note of a song. Ethan felt tears suddenly spring to his eyes. His throat tightened. Yes, he said, his voice breaking. Yes, I was. For the first time in years, maybe the first time ever, my mind was completely quiet. There was no chaos, no noise, just the flame. Just the moment. Samuel reached out and placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. My son, you've just discovered the secret that people spend lifetimes searching for. The peace you want isn't hiding in some future version of your life where everything is perfect. It's not buried in the past, waiting for you to go back and fix your mistakes. Peace is right here, right now, in this present moment. It's always been here. You just couldn't see it because your mind was everywhere except where you actually were. He continued, his voice carrying a wisdom earned through years of his own searching. When your mind was completely absorbed in protecting that flame, your past couldn't touch you. Those regrets, those mistakes, they only have power when you give them your attention, when you feed them with your focus. And your future, all those fears and anxieties, they only exist when your mind jumps ahead to scenarios that haven't happened and may never happen. But when you're fully present, completely here, there's no room for any of that. The present moment is always peaceful because in this moment, right now, you're okay. You're breathing, you're alive, and that's enough. Ethan sat in silence, letting the words sink in. Everything he'd been doing, every strategy he'd tried to find peace, had been focused on trying to stop his thoughts, to control his mind, to fix something he thought was broken. But Samuel was showing him something completely different. So I don't need to fight my thoughts? Ethan asked. I don't need to make them stop? Samuel shook his head. Thoughts will come. That's what minds do. But when you learn to live like you walked with that lantern, fully present, fully focused on what's actually in front of you, those thoughts lose their power. They become like clouds passing through the sky. You notice them, but you don't chase them. You don't fight them. You simply return your attention to this moment, this breath, this step. But how do I do that in regular life? Ethan asked. I can't carry a lantern everywhere. Samuel chuckled. You don't need a lantern. The lantern was just a teacher. When you eat, taste your food. Feel the texture. Notice the flavors. When you walk. Feel your feet touching the ground. Notice the air on your skin. When someone talks to you, listen. Really listen, not just waiting for your turn to speak. When you're washing dishes, wash dishes. Feel the warm water, the smooth ceramic. Give your complete attention to whatever you're doing, and you'll find that every moment becomes like walking with that flame. Present, focused, peaceful. Ethan bowed his head, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you, he said simply. Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see. Samuel smiled. I didn't show you anything, Ethan. You discovered it yourself. I just gave you the opportunity to look. Now you have to practice. Every time your mind drifts to the past or jumps to the future, gently bring it back. Think of that flame. Remember how carefully you protected it. Protect your presence in this moment with the same care. That's where life actually happens. That's where peace lives. Ethan drove home that evening as the sun set behind him, but he was different now. He wasn't planning what he'd say to people about his experience. He wasn't worrying about tomorrow's challenges. He was just driving, feeling his hands on the steering wheel, watching the road unfold before him, existing fully in each passing moment. When he got home, he made dinner. And for the first time he could remember, he actually tasted his food. He noticed the crunch of the vegetables, the warmth of the soup, the simple satisfaction of nourishment. His mind tried to drift to work tomorrow, but he caught it, like catching a leaf before it blows away, and brought it back to the present, to the meal, to this moment. Days turned into weeks. Old habits tried to reassert themselves. His mind would start racing, dragging him into memories or projecting him into anxious futures. But each time, Ethan remembered the flame. He'd pause, take a breath, and ask himself, where am I right now? What am I doing in this actual moment? And each time he did this, the chaos quieted. Not because his circumstances changed, not because his problems disappeared, but because he stopped living everywhere except where he actually was. He learned that anxiety only exists when his mind jumps to the future. Depression only grips him when he's lost in the past. But right here, right now, in this present moment, he was always okay. Always breathing. Always capable of taking the next step. And that's the truth that Ethan discovered on that mountain trail. The truth that Samuel knew. The truth that has been whispered by wise people throughout all of human history. Peace isn't something you achieve. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's not dependent on your circumstances being perfect or your life being figured out. Peace is the natural state that emerges when you stop abandoning this moment for some other time. When you stop living in the story your mind tells you and start living in the reality that is actually here. The past exists only as memory. The future exists only as imagination. But this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this is real. This is where life is actually happening. And when you meet this moment with your full attention, you discover it was never your circumstances that were stealing your peace. It was your absence from your own life. So if you find yourself trapped in the same cycle Ethan was caught in, if your mind races endlessly between regret and worry, remember the lesson of the flame. You don't need to climb a mountain. You don't need to find a wise teacher. You just need to come back. Right here. Right now. Feel your breath moving in and out. Notice where you're sitting. Hear the sounds around you. This moment, exactly as it is enough. You are enough. And the peace you've been searching for has been waiting here all along, in the only place it could ever be found, right here, in the present moment. If this story resonated with you, if it opened your eyes to a truth you needed to hear, do me a favor. Hit that like button and share this video with someone who's struggling with their restless mind. Your share might be exactly what they need today. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because I'll be back soon with another story that might just change everything. Until then, remember, the present moment is all you ever have. It's all you ever need. Stay here, stay present, and watch how everything changes.